From inauguration crowd size to cries of voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election and just about everything in between, Donald Trump's presidency has been filled with false claims and conspiracy theories. NBCNews.com checked out some of the most outrageous falsehoods of his presidency. And you know what that means. It is time to bring in our friendly fact checker one more time this year. Jane, you are officially my last interview of 2020. Couldn't imagine wrapping up the year with anybody else. NBCNews.com political reporter Jane Timm. So, Jane, hit us with some of the biggest falsehoods from the president's presidency, if you will.
You know, we've been doing these annual lists of the biggest falsehoods every year, but for this one, we wanted to look into what were the sort of defining fundamental falsehoods of his entire presidency. And for me, that came down to downplaying COVID was, I think, the biggest one. That was saying it was just like the flu, stay calm, it'll go away. In these critical early days where experts told us containment was still possible and it would need a really strong, unified response, you had a president who was downplaying it while privately telling reporter Bob Woodward that he knew it was much worse than he was saying. Next on my list was voter fraud. Of course, the president saying that he won the 2020 election when he didn't, and saying that there were millions of illegal votes. That we know is not true. The election was devoid of pretty much any kind of substantive fraud, as most elections are, actually all U.S. elections recently. Voter fraud is obviously an isolated and anecdotal issue. It's not a big deal, but the president has been saying this since, 2016. When he won the 2016 election, he claimed he only lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton because of voter fraud. So we perhaps shouldn't have been surprised when you look back at the falsehoods through history. The other two ones, of course, foreign meddling in the election. That was a really big one. This is something that eventually got him impeached when he took up this conspiracy theory that maybe Ukraine had framed Russia and that the DNC servers were somewhere in Ukraine. There's absolutely no evidence of that. And it's actually a falsehood that the Russian intelligence have pushed, the idea that Ukraine was responsible for the hacking of the U.S. election that they did, the interfering and sowing divisions online. And then finally, you can't stop a Trump falsehood list without looking at how he talks about his policy. There's a lot of falsehoods in that, everything from tax reform to the idea that Americans are flushing their toilets 10, 15 times a day. All of those, a lot of the ways he talks about his policy is rooted in falsehoods. He misled the American people quite a lot in the last 4 years. It's kept me very busy.
Yeah, Jane, to that end, I have to ask you two quick questions before we go. One, have you been able to keep a tally of just how many total falsehoods there have been? Are they too many? And what are you going to do come January 20th? I remember asking you once what you did before this, and I think you told me you covered like Americana and things like that. Do you plan to continue doing this into the new year?
Well, I will be there covering politics and fact-checking the new president-elect. You never stop fact-checking, no matter who's in office. But as for the account, there's many, many thousands. I have not personally counted, but the Washington Post has a tally of 26,000 falsehoods while the president was in office, which is whew.
That's a whole long list there. Jane, we have been so grateful for your fact checking. We look forward to more of your fact checking in 2021. And let's see how the numbers stack up if Joe Biden and President Trump are on the same page or if it's a very different story. Thanks so much, Jane.
See you next year, Allison.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.